Oh, okay, that's it. That's his PowerPoint.
It's going,
Yeah, but how do you make it big?
That's,
we're almost on YouTube Live. Okay. We are on YouTube Live.
Or maybe when he starts
Hey,
speaking.
Bob, go ahead. You're up. We're on YouTube.
Okay, well, this is our title slide, and I've seen various titles from, I guess, from August through today, and this is one I've come up with for today. Invisible Threat, How My Experience in Baltimore and Peru Motivated Me to Write About a Pandemic.
Can
Now,
you make it louder?
can you hear me okay?
now can you increase your volume a little?
I can try to.
That's better.
How's that?
Yeah, much better.
Thank you.
All right. Why a book about a pandemic? Why we're in the middle of a pandemic? Well, I wrote this in 2019, well before we had a pandemic. Who knew we were going to be in the middle of a pandemic right now? I have my reasons for writing a pandemic, and we'll get to that. And I'll tell you the what's, the where's, or the wherefores, and everything about that in a minute. There's the title. I think the cover page. You've probably seen that in several of the blasts from the temple. I'm pretty proud of the book. It's my first novel ever. I've written many, many papers, probably 100 in the scientific literature. This is my first novel. I've always wanted to write. You'll see that as we go through this. But there are so many similarities to what's happened during the COVID pandemic. I wrote this book and finished it in January. And then things started to pop over the last several months, and it's sort of eerie. If you read the book, and I am donating 5 books. I think I mentioned this a while back. We never got to do it, have the sort of a donation to buy them. But I'm giving 5 books, softcover books. I think they currently list for $14 or $15. You can write a check out to the temple, and we'll somehow manage to get that money to the temple if you want to write a check out to the temple. And I'll leave these with much how we'll do this physically, but we'll get this money to the temple and get the books to you. So anyway, it's very eerie. I'm not a psychic, but there are so many similarities. You've seen this before. I wanted to get a little virology, as we did last time. This is COVID, but viruses are all different. And a couple of viruses in my book, the major one we're going to talk about is measles. See, all viruses, many viruses are different. This is measles virus. Why measles? I'll get to that in a minute. This has a lot of surface proteins, but I want to mention there's a fusion protein and there's an attachment protein, a hemagglutinin. But the fusion protein is pretty important. But the insides are different. The RNA is different. COVID has a positive RNA. Measles has a negative RNA, which means it makes a lot of mistakes. It has to revert to a positive before it translates into a positive and then replicates itself. Everything's different. We heard about measles when I talked to you about the Faroe Islands, and everybody was infected within a couple of months. You heard a little bit about, probably in the news, about the R naught, how quickly a virus can be transmitted to a group. You heard that the R naught of COVID is 1, maybe in a group of people. If someone comes in with COVID, it can maybe transmit, you can transmit to 1 person. If 1 individual with measles gets into a room of people, it can transmit. Measles is probably the most transmittable virus there is. 1 person can transmit to 18 people. It's so infectious. It's the most infectious virus there is. It's really horrible. That's why kids have to get vaccinated with it. So what they call the R naught is 12 to 18. One person can affect 12 to 18 people. There are stories where one person goes into an airport with measles. It basically gets through the airport and goes all over the country. That's how bad it is. So anyway, I told you that story about the Faroe Islands. It spreads like wildfire, this virus. That's just a micrograph. I'll skip over that. But I wanted to show you a little bit about this. I was involved in measles virus for many years when I was studying it in academia. By the way, Amy's on the call, and she's in the other room, but she didn't want to be too close for the interference with the two computers. So I was away for several months studying it in a foreign country. But you'll see in the United States how in 1960, in the 60s, how we had in the 50s, in the how after introduction of the measles vaccine in 1962, 63, after virus vaccine was introduced, the cases of measles just dropped tremendously. Can you see those numbers okay? Nod your head, Charles. I can see your, okay. Just dropped dramatically. And that's why vaccination is so important. We had one vaccine in 63 introduced and another a better one in 68, such that, it basically disappeared. And I'll show you another graph later. We had a little history in the United States. In fact, this is a good week to talk about Columbus. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. He also brought a lot of diseases, including killing off a lot of native islanders with measles virus when he landed. In the Union troops, 67,000 Union troops contracted measles. 4,000 died in 1 year with measles virus, which was a catastrophe during some of the battles. In the early 1900s, between 4,700 and 14,000 died every year from measles. It's not an easy virus to contain. And this graph shows you the problems that we had just in the US with measles. This is another graph showing recorded cases. And it shows you down for the 2000s, basically, virus was basically shown to be eliminated in the States toward the early 1990s, which is why I'll get to why I wrote this novel. Now, I traveled to Peru. This is not where I traveled to study measles, but this is a segue. This is Machu Picchu up in the mountains below Cusco. This is just a segue. This is not really where I studied measles, but it was where I went on vacation one weekend. Amy wasn't with me. She had to stay home with babies, who didn't recognize me when I came home because I was gone too long. Another story. By the way, going back one graph, I just wanted to show you worldwide, while we were down to 0 measles cases, the reason I studied measles in Peru, why would you go to Peru to study measles? Back in 1980, when I was going to Peru, there were over 1 million deaths in children worldwide in 1980. 1 million children worldwide were dying from measles. We're talking about COVID deaths, which is a big problem, obviously, but worldwide there were more than 1 million children dying per year worldwide from measles. This is where I was studying measles. These were the barriados surrounding Lima. This is where I was going into the barriados, where every year there was immigration of the Quechuan population. These are the native population from the Andes who were coming in to Lima looking for a better life. They were coming in from the lower Andes. This is the native population. They used to be the royalty of Peru, the Quechuan population, until when the Spanish invaded all of South America. And they were looking for a better life, and this is where they lived. And they came in every year. They had a huge population growth and a huge immigration. So every year there was a huge population of new people, new children who were not immune, who had never seen the virus. It was very hot. There was no way to deliver a vaccine. There was no vaccine available. So every year there was basically an epidemic of measles virus. So our goal, and we got money from the WHO to study my goal was to study the immune response to measles virus and why certain children were getting sick and others weren't. And this was millions of people living in these conditions. This is what it looks like. Several million people living in these conditions, expansive population. Now, I'm happy to say, in the current climate, measles have been wiped out. There's no more measles in Peru. This is what measles look like. Doctors today do not see measles. There's no more measles, at least for the most part. Doctors do not know what measles looks like. This is typical measles rash. It starts in the head, moves down. They start out with the 3 C's: cough, coryza, which is inflammation of the mucous membrane, and conjunctivitis. I'm a PhD, but I know more about, I can recognize measles from 20 feet away. This is typical measles, a rubeola rash. And you don't want to see this because it spreads like wildfire. Oh, this is another picture of me from a long time ago with dark hair. And I happen to take another trip. This is also not where measles is spread, in the Amazon jungle on the other side of the mountains. I happened to come upon some natives, and this guy taught me how to shoot a blowgun. And I was proud to say that, he sold me that blowgun for a pack of cigarettes. So I actually got on the airplane for a pack of cigarettes. I didn't really smoke back then, but I carried that with me for trading purposes. And another trip I took was over the lines of Nazca. Ever seen the lines of Nazca? Beautiful. And I showed this picture of a beer bottle. We set up our own laboratory, and the Kielsen Brewing Company of Cayo, outside of Lima, donated us a freezer to help to develop our laboratory. And we had a scrounge for money down there. So anyway, a little ad from 40 years ago. I'm not sure you can see this word. I mentioned the fusion protein on measles. Measles causes giant cell pneumonia. What it does, that fusion protein causes the cells all to fuse together. And you see these little dots in the middle? That used to be a lot of different cells. Now it fuses all the cells together. The cells don't work anymore. It fuses the lung cells together and they can't work. In more cases than not, the children get pneumonia and they die. We saw more cases of little children dying at 1 and 2 years of age. Just can't breathe. It's called multinucleated giant cells, because the cells get into the measles gets into the respiratory tract, and they can't clear the virus. The other thing that measles cause, this is a general curve. I'm not going to bore you with this, but I will show you the graph that measles, in addition to just causing infection, causes immunosuppression, just like HIV, but not as bad. For 1 to 2 months, when measles gets into your body, it immunosuppresses you. All these graphs show you that for 1 to 1 week to 3 months, depending on what you're measuring, measles will immunosuppress you. So on top of measles virus, other infections will be increased. Pneumonia, bacteria, other things will be infecting you. And that's the other thing you'll see in these children. They'll get bacterial infections of their lung. And that will be something that will be on top of the actual measles virus. So why a novel? Well, after the last 2 years, measles virus is on a comeback. People are not taking their vaccines. The anti-vaccine talk, there's so much of it. The anti-vaxxers are out there. There was a presentation in the early 90s and a publication in the journal Lancet by a British doctor who said that measles vaccine was causing problems with children, causing ADHD and other issues with children's dysfunction. And it's all been actually disproven at this point. But for years, the anti-vaxxers have been out there purporting that this has all been true. And what's been problematic is with the lack of vaccination, there have been a lot of measles cases that have been popping up again. So negative talk about vaccine, the poor knowledge of the history of the disease, the fact that, oh, it's just a childhood vaccine, when in fact, 1%, 1 in 1,000 children die, 1 in 1,000 get neurologic disease. We actually saw in 1 year 11 cases of encephalomyelitis, which is one of the other reasons we went there to study it, to study what causes the encephalitis. In fact, we showed that it was an immune-mediated disease. We saw this we see the increase in pediatric infections. We see an increase in imported infections when people are coming in from other countries. And I always wanted to write a novel. In fact, once I started writing in graduate school, I started writing a novel, and I put it down for about a year. And all of a sudden, I see something that came out that Michael Crichton wrote, and lo and behold, the first couple of chapters were just like mine. So I was on the right track. So I think I had it in me. So this is what happened a few years ago. There was an outbreak in Disneyland. And then, can't see this, but over the last couple of years, I can't see it on my screen, but there was an increase. And that's what got me started on writing. And in 2019, I wrote Invisible Threat. Not sure what's on the next slide. Oh, so I use my background in virology and immunology. I have a passion for prevention of infection. I combine my Jewish background, and I wanted to learn a little bit about Islam. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. I put together a bioterrorism thriller in various geographic locations familiar to me, and I wanted to write a positive message about vaccination. What I did here is I put together an intersection of two characters born to immigrant families, a second generation, a confused young man who grows into a confused adult. He was a product of a Jewish-Muslim marriage. A young woman who seems to have her life in order. She's a Korean American. These are two parallel tracks. That's sort of a parallel character, an antagonist and a protagonist. It takes place in mostly the Boston, Providence area and DC and Baltimore areas I'm familiar with, and other areas that I'm not so familiar with that I've learned the geographical locations of just basically by reading, in Syria and Jordan. And it takes place from the 1980s all the way through current time. And that's the book itself. and I'm gonna, if you don't mind, read just a short passage, and then I'll take questions. Throughout the book, I have interspersed several times a late night radio host who brings on guests. And I actually listen to a late night host. So it's sort of patterned after this late night host. So I'm going to read this, and you can, we'll take questions after that. Good morning to all you late night owls all over the globe. This is your host of the early morning airwaves, Jerry Nesmith, your humble lady of the night. Once again, we have a great show for you this morning. We bring you the news that network and cable stations choose not to deal with. We focused on the out of the ordinary and stories that other outlets will eventually report. I hope you have all gotten your tax returns filed. If not, you have about 24 hours. It is early in the morning of a day we must face the music, so to speak. Tonight, before we get to our first guest, who will discuss his book on the real pirates of the Caribbean, I'd like to have Duncan Johnson come on live. Duncan, affectionately known here as Dunk, has some breaking news. Dunk, why the urgent call this morning? We usually tape our reports with you. Jerry, thanks for taking my call. Yes, we do usually get together and tape some newsy events for the show. I hope you can trust me for an unscripted hot item that could devastate us all. Doc, I don't care about the unscripted part, but I am quite upset about the devastating part, Jerry replied. Well, I just broke my arm. Not so devastating, of course. But when I came out of the ER at San Ysidro Hospital, an area where I was covering another story, I saw 5 children in another cubicle or in the hall. All appeared to be dead or dying. Another child was limping into the emergency room with parents on each arm. Several in the waiting area also appeared to be in a similar condition. The ones I saw had rashes covering their bodies. I believe something strange is in the air. Will we have some follow-up on this, Doc? Jerry responded. Sounds like something may be brewing down south in California. I will call you after the show for an update. I want you on the air tomorrow. Thanks again. Okay. Well, that's it. I'll take any questions, and let me stop sharing right now. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Hi, Bob. It's Shelley.
Hi, Shelley.
I really enjoyed your book.
Oh,
and
thank you.
thank you for sharing that with us. And here's one of the questions that I had in my mind as I read the book to completion. Dr. Mazur's ability to affect the production of the vaccine raised alarms for me. How realistic is this in terms of potential sabotage?
Honestly, I don't think it's that realistic. I think there are a lot of controls, and I don't know if it's that realistic in terms of sabotage. It could happen, but I think there are tighter controls on that in the industry.
Okay. I also wanted to tell you that I love the surprise ending concerning his wife, Sabina. I never.
Oh, you may be giving it away.
I just never saw it coming.
No,
That's all I'll say. Never saw that coming, and it was great. It was
Okay.
great that you put that in there.
Thank you.
Now, did you decide to make the parents of Alan Mazur a Jewish Muslim mix because you wanted to also delve into the topic of Islam? Is that why you did that?
I did. I wanted to learn a little bit about it, and it certainly got me. I certainly learned a lot about Islam. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I read the book too, and I found it fascinating. And a lot of the or some of the anti-vax stance comes out of the Hasidic community too.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And obviously, that's a problem. And I'm not sure how to deal with, I didn't deal with that in the book. I didn't deal with any specific group in the book. But it is a religious issue, obviously.
And don't you think the leadership on that issue, combating the misinformation about that, has to come from the rabbinical leadership?
It should.
Yeah.
I don't know how do we deal with that?
I don't know, because there's a lot of anti-science now in that same community with irresponsible behavior in terms of COVID.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a lot,
It's
wasn't
not
there an
just with
outbreak?
it's not just with vaccines, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Wasn't there a measles outbreak in the New York State communities?
Oh,
Like New City and some of those up in Westchester or not in Rockland County?
yes, it was a bad outbreak. Yes.
So, Bob, what is your, I know this was your life's work, immunology, virology, infectious disease. What is your best estimate of, number one, whether they'll get a safe and effective vaccine? And if so, when it will be available generally
For COVID,
for COVID? Yes.
SARS. We've got 3 or 4 in phase 3 right now, one in a temporary pause, so to speak, or 2 in a temporary pause. It doesn't mean much. It all depends on how well they do. I mean, I've been in clinical trials. I've done clinical trials, phase 3 clinical trials, and at the end, you end up with nothing. You've been in a study, you're doing a study for a year, and you look at the data, and you spent your life doing it, not your life, but you spent a whole year doing it. Look at the data, and there's nothing there. That could be the result with all 5 vaccines. I doubt it, because you have preliminary data on some of them that look good. I would say you're not getting a result until on one of them, at least until March.
Okay. And then I had another question.
And then let me finish up on that.
Sure.
And then you have production issues and getting it out to the public. So you're talking, this whole winter, don't expect a vaccine available.
Mhm.
And you have to get out to everybody for next year.
And what about the drugs that are used to treat COVID? Do you see that coming down the pipeline more quickly, the more effective treatments than the vaccine?
Well, first we have remdesivir. That's already shown pretty much to be useful, that antiviral remdesivir. I believe the application for that, I'm not sure where the application for that is, but they're already using it off-label, because I think it's already been approved for other uses. The monoclonal antibodies, I think, are fast-tracked. So I think that those are going to be available more quickly.
So those monoclonal antibodies, are those things that are also used in treating cancer?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
There are hundreds of monoclonal antibodies that have been approved for use in various things, everywhere from cholesterol to migraines to toxic shock to everything. Yeah,
Okay.
nothing new there.
Okay.
In fact, I worked on the first one ever in 1986.
Now, Dr. Redfield, the CDC director, said within the last several weeks, I think in a congressional hearing, that the single most important thing all of us can do, pending a safe and effective vaccine, and it might even be better than a vaccine, is wearing a mask. does the, and we both do every time we go out, does the science support that?
I think it does, and I wrote a letter to our Collier County Commissioner about an hour ago and implore him to continue with the mandate. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Bob,
Social distance, wash your hands, don't touch your face, and wear a mask.
Mhm.
Yeah, very difficult not to touch your face.
Right?
Bob,
Bob, is,
Yes.
I'm really curious, which Michael Crichton book did your book have so many
I
similarities?
honestly, I don't remember, but it had to do with getting some virus in your eye, but that's what I was writing.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't about dinosaurs, though.
No.
No, that was an insurance scam. In other words, the insurance company was poisoning people who did not have good health profiles because they didn't want to pay for their treatment.
Oh,
Was that Thelma?
yeah, that's Michael. Bob, how available is remdesivir for general use for people who are diagnosed with COVID?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because obviously our president got the Class A treatment, to which he's entitled, but not everybody's going to have that same
Yeah.
treatment available,
I don't-
obviously.
Yeah,
No
I don't
matter
know
what he says.
how available. I really
He,
don't.
he says he'll make it available to everybody.
It says a lot of things.
Do
I
you,
have a question. I have a
Yeah.
question.
do you
Um,
think that
what
the
are-
CDC
what are the-
director should resign?
I was talking over you, Shelley, sorry.
That's okay. I was just asking whether you think Redfield has exhausted its credibility.
I don't think he has. I think
Head of FDA, I think.
he's had difficulty with his superiors, but I think his credibility is fine.
Mhm.
I mean, he's had difficulty because of the politics.
Yeah.
My question is, with people wearing masks, is there any indications, have you seen anything about that helping with other diseases because of the fact we're wearing masks? Like, I almost always get a summer cold. I did not get one this year because I always wear a mask when I'm out.
Mhm.
I don't know whether that's it or not, but
Oh, I just touched my face.
does it help? I mean,
He said he
it
just
helps
touched his
other,
face.
other diseases.
Yeah, it has to.
I don't know that he heard
I don't know, it would be something that we'll probably see written up in the New England Journal in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Is there any, in your opinion, is there any reason to suspect that these few cases of so-called reinfection are real, or were they because of immunosuppression or because of a different strain of the virus?
Well, all I've heard is it may have been a different strain. Every time the virus gets spit out, it's got a different genetic code. They change all the time.
Right.
Now, from the very beginning, there have been changes to this virus. For instance, the spike protein has been changing from the very beginning. For instance, there have been reports, and I've read them, that new COVID strains are coming out with more spike proteins on than the initial COVID, which means it can bind much better.
Yeah.
Okay, not that it's changed, but there are more spike proteins per cubic centimeter, per square centimeter on the surface than the original COVID, in the original SARS virus. Now, whether or not the actual protein has changed, I don't know. Now, the people who have been reinfected, I think there were 2 I've seen reports of. Who knows if they were really infected? I don't know if they were verified infected before. I mean, one was in Australia, right?
One was in Australia and one was in Holland, Netherlands, and he was immunocompromised. He was on chemo, I believe.
Was he reinfected or was he still infected?
Supposedly, it was
was he
a bona fide
persistently-
reinfection.
Was he persistently infected? Yeah, I've worked with persistent infections. Sometimes they lay low and they just come back and you just see more virus coming back in.
Yeah.
It's possible this person was persistently infected and it just reemerged.
Is
Yeah,
this,
I agree with you. I think that if you truly are infected and are having a competent immune system and develop an antibody to the protein, then you should not be able to be reinfected with that virus. And that seems to be the prevailing situation, that these reports of so-called reinfection are very rare. And as you point out, is it truly, was it was it tested? Was it reviewed? Were they truly infected to begin with? Were they truly reinfected, or what's, I think it's very strange that this one particular virus would act that way when almost all the other viruses, once you have immunity, it's lifelong.
But it's been changing itself.
Yeah, but they're not changing the protein. They're changing the structure, not the actual chemistry.
But for example, if you may have had chickenpox, okay, or you may have had the vaccine for chickenpox, which did not exist when we were kids, and it comes back as an adult, in a very different, more virulent form, but it's the same virus.
Yeah, so that's a
But
different,
those
but that's a persistent infection that stays within your cells.
Yeah.
That stays within your cells.
Right.
Those
are herpes viruses.
Infection which comes and goes. That you would expect that though, Michael. That's a persistent infection. That's like a herpes. That's a herpes type virus. It stays within your body.
Right. It lives in the nerve roots. So
Right,
that's a
exactly.
little different animal,
Right.
or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that you can compare the coronavirus with the herpes virus
Right.
in that regard.
All right.
So what about the fact that there are people who have had COVID and now they call them long haulers, people who seem to still be sick months later with different symptoms? Is that similar in that it stays in the nerves?
I think that may be just a function of an inflammatory reaction that they had in their brain, a neurological disease. That's not the virus per se, but a secondary effect of the infection. The neurological effect, secondary, just like you have long-term effects of an infection in your lung. You'd have a problem with breathing. It would be damage from the virus. And that's maybe permanent. People are having problems with cognitive functions,
Yeah.
just long-term effects. Not the virus is still there, it's gone, but the damage is there. Damage is done.
Okay.
with the fact that the virus is evolving, does that make it a problem for creating a vaccine, or is this a normal thing with viruses?
Yeah, it could be a problem. It could be you need to make, it could be that vaccines may not be the answer. It could be treatment may be the answer.
Wow. That's bad.
That's the way to keep our hope up.
But back to invisible threat. Any other questions?
Something positive,
Yeah, let's
please.
end on a positive note.
Hey, we're all healthy.
Has anybody not read it? Yeah, a lot of people haven't read it. Okay, well, there's a sale this week, a Prime sale on the ebook. It's down to $3.99 on Kindle.
Well, Bob, we have our copy.
We have a copy too. Paul has read it. I haven't had a chance.
Okay.
The one thing I wanted to say is that years ago, I was the science and medical editor at The Sun, among other things. And we would get these calls from I call them the vaccine crazies. Now we're talking about 2005, 2006, and they were convinced that their kids had been autism had been caused by vaccinations, and you try to talk to them logically, and they would wind up screaming at you. You know, and it was really strange. And I talked to some doctors about that, and they said, you know, there may be some genetic thing at work here, because you know their kids tend to act strangely, and it may be something that the parents do too, but they just go totally bananas, and they're blaming me because I'm the science editor, you know, and I'm not telling the world that they should give up vaccines.
People want a scapegoat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Fortunately, too much of an echo of today.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Except there's much more of an echo today, because the internet did not have anywhere near its reach in, say, 2006, 2007
Right.
that it has now.
Yeah.
And the part of the problem is you have authority figures who are hyping this crap. I've seen articles written by nurses who swear that autism is caused by vaccine. We've got some physicians who are advising Trump incorrectly putting out garbage, and they speak with authority because they have a degree after their name. And it just worsens the situation for real science and for people who are logical and can put two and two together. It feeds the conspiracy theories, and it's awful. It's really it's a very difficult problem that we face in our times because of the internet and because of the misinformation and the radical sites that want to keep people in turmoil.
Yeah.
Do you remember that great movie with Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts, where he plays a crazy conspiracy theorist, and he actually stumbles on a real conspiracy?
Yeah.
And
What was it called? Conspiracy?
I don't remember what the name was, but it was
I think it might have been.
it was a really
It's called the conspiracy theory, wasn't it? No.
pardon?
Wasn't it called conspiracy theory?
It was.
Yeah, conspiracy theory. That's what it was called. But it was it was definitely showed the old saying that even paranoids have enemies.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, one of my characters in here uses the internet to go through it and develop the whole misleading aspect of the measles problem. I play one character against the other in terms of the vaccine good, vaccine bad there. So.
Mhm.
I did confirm with Google that it was conspiracy theory.
I hardly recommend it if you can find it on Netflix or
Yeah,
something.
it's quite old, yeah.
Yeah.
It was I mean,
So old, you have to pay for it.
yeah. Well, they older good movies are usually still have a price attached to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but who wants to pay for Mel Gibson?
Oh, I wouldn't normally, except he was really good in this. So
You should pay us. Well, I have to scoot, but thank you so much,
Yeah.
Bob.
You're welcome. We'll be
Thank you.
listening.
I'm looking forward to reading your book.
We'll be listening.
Thank you.
We'll be listening tomorrow night to you sing.
Oh, good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bob.
take care.
Okay, thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you all.
We really enjoyed it, Bob. Thank you.
And we enjoyed your